Welcome to Doc Talks, and I'm very happy to introduce part 2 of our conversation with Peter Funt, the director of Mr. Candid Camera. Our conversation took a look at the legendary show Candid Camera. We talked about his father, Alan Funt. We had a lot to talk about, so enjoy part 2 of my conversation with Peter Funt. The show full-time in 1987. What was your role once you joined the show?
Yeah. So at that time, I was living in Connecticut and had an office in my house. And at that time, my dad was living in Hollywood and had an office in his house. And we were mostly doing specials. So they were 1-hour network specials, maybe one a month, one every 2 months on CBS. And so my dad said one day, Pete, we're going to divide up the country as far as shooting the gags go. So I'll take everything, he said. He said, I'll take everything west of the Hollywood freeway, and you take everything to the east. Right. Which essentially meant I was the one running around the whole country at that point. And then I'd send the footage to LA and they'd edit it. And and then I'd go out there and we'd do the intros together. It was a lot of fun, and it was good experience. It was really seat of the pants stuff for me, because although I'd worked with them at various times, watched them, studied the footage, whatever, when you're out there alone, and by alone, I mean in charge of this setup and this crew and this production, and the clock is ticking and money is being spent, it was challenging, but I loved every minute of it. And getting to go around the country as much as I did was fascinating to me. Like my dad, I like to study people. And if you go to, the various corners of America, let's just say there's a lot going on between the East Coast and the West Coast. There's a lot of Americana in the middle there.
So being a fan, as I am, of the show, I did see that the production values would obviously increase, certainly once you were, because I remember very clearly, I remember you as the host. Once you were fully immersed in the show, who came up with as it became more complex, who came up with that? Did you have producers, or was it still you that was fully involved with it?
At the height of my popularity doing the show on CBS, we did get a lot of mail from viewers and then email with idea suggestions. Now, the vast majority of them were useless. They often took the form of, you really ought to catch my brother-in-law. He is so funny. Right. Well, that's not how Candid Camera works. But there were, over the years, some pretty good ideas. Don't ask me to name, well, I could, but that came in from viewers as opposed to my own staff or myself. But as I said before, I couldn't count on that. And most of the ideas came out of my head.
And as time went on and you were doing it more and more, did you get recognized? Were you busted, like right off the bat?
No, nor was my dad.
Wow.
The thing there was a time at the height of his career in the 1960s when Life magazine, I believe it was, had a feature that they called the 10 most recognizable people in America.
Right.
Number 1 was John F. Kennedy. And somewhere in the other half of that 10 was Alan Funt.
Wow.
And that very afternoon, when the magazine hit the newsstands, He was in a dry cleaning shop pretending to be the clerk, and nobody recognized him at all.
Wow.
Sometimes he wore a hat, sometimes he wore glasses, but certainly not an elaborate disguise. It all has to do with, number one, circumstance. If you're picking up your dry cleaning, you just do not expect that the guy waiting on you is from television.
Right.
Just those dots do not connect for
Right.
most people. Number two, candid camera almost always involves some kind of distraction. It's a problem, it's a challenge, it's a question. And so, at least for the few minutes that that's underway, and that's all it takes, people really aren't paying much attention, again, to the face of that guy they're dealing with. They're struggling with the problem. If you gave them more time, I think, of course, they'd recognize my dad, or perhaps myself. And then my dad used to say, and I don't know if he had the percentages right, but he said, you know, Pete, half of the population seems to see everything, and the other half seems to go through life seeing nothing.
Right.
And that's an oversimplification for sure, but it is true that, because invariably, you know, I'd say, well, sir, my name's Peter Funt. Please look over there and smile. You're on the Candid Camera Show. And the guy would say, Peter, I watch you every Friday. I can't believe I didn't recognize you.
Right.
I feel like a dope. I said, don't, you're in good company. My relatives watch the show and don't always recognize me. No, it's just human nature worked to our advantage in that respect, for sure.
Right. I always used to say they'll never catch me. I'll definitely recognize them, but probably wouldn't have. Are there any memorable reactions, good or bad, that you remember? Any that stand out? So a bad reaction and a good reaction.
Okay. My dad's worst reaction, came when he was doing a bit in a barber shop, and it was a very simple joke. My dad played the barber and was trying to offer this customer in the chair things that he didn't want, didn't need, a manicure or a shoe shine or a massage. You know, he just wanted a trim. And I mean, talk about a simple and mild gag, and not even really very funny. But the guy sat there listening to all this, and then without warning, and that's the point, without warning, got up, took off that little bib or cloth, walked over and picked up a straight razor and chased my father round and round that barber shop, waving this razor, threatening to cut his throat.
Well, that's not good.
Fortunately, there was no bloodshed that day.
Right.
But that's, I imagine, the worst reaction you could get. As for me, as far as bad reactions, I had one occasion at an airport where this was pre 9/11, but just before 9/11. And I had set up a screening thing, and I was playing the security officer. And basically, I told the passengers they had to get down on their stomach and roll through the X-ray machine on a conveyor belt so I could see if they had anything suspicious. Well, the surprising thing, maybe it's not surprising, is that people willingly did it. But the unfortunate thing was that one of the people, when they were getting off the conveyor belt, got a little bruise on their thigh, this guy getting off the machine. Said he was fine, said there was no problem, left, went on his flight, but a few months later sued us. Then 9/11 happened, and everything about airport security turned from comical to dead serious.
Right.
So that's when he and his lawyers felt, boy, we've got a good suit now. especially if we get in front of a jury. Well, this darn thing wound up at Los Angeles Superior Court and carried live by Court TV.
Wow.
And went on for days. And the people I knew in television, I wish they were more supportive of me. I'm talking about producers and network executives, but they were furious with me. They said, Peter, what are you doing? We don't take these things. We don't let these things go to court. We settle. That's how we operate. We pay them something and it goes away. What are you doing? I said, what I'm doing is exercising what I think are my rights and my pride here. I didn't really do anything wrong. We offered the guy medical attention. He declined. We offered him some compensation on the spot for his inconvenience, and he declined. We asked him for his medical bills months later. There were none. And he wanted millions of dollars, right. And I didn't want to give it to him, nor did my insurance company.
I agree. Yeah. No, I did read that. I said I did read that story, that lawsuit.
And those who are curious enough, it's an entire chapter in my book. My book came out a few months ago. It's called Self-Amused, subtitled A Tell-Some Memoir. Wow. It's not a tell-all memoir, but it's a tell-some memoir. But there is an entire chapter in the book, and it's about this incident. So in answer to your question, that was about the worst. I'll tell you the best that ever happened to me came when I was interviewing a guy. We were sitting across from each other at a table. At the end, I told him, smile, you're on candid camera. He threw up his arms in delight and proceeded to fall over backwards, and his feet flew up in the air. And for a moment, I thought either A, this guy's broken his neck, or B, this is going to be the biggest lawsuit we ever suffered. But it was neither. He popped up, hugging me, happy. And it was just a beautiful visual. Wow. Don't get me wrong. I don't ever want to hurt people, not at the airport, and certainly not when they go over backwards in their chair. But it was a wonderful piece of footage and a happy moment at the end.
So obviously I grew up in the UK, and I remember watching Candid Camera in England, and the Peter Funt person was British. Was there a British spin-off?
Yeah, that was, we authorized that. They paid us a fee to do that. They used our ideas plus some of their own, but it was a genuine authorized derivative version of the American show. And my dad and I, we used some of that footage on our show here, the British footage, because there's a wonderful sensibility and it's a different type of humor. You know, people who are fans of, I don't know, Monty Python or whatever, have come to understand that the British sense of humor, even though they speak the same language, can be very, very different.
Right.
And so the work of Peter Dulé, if I remember his name correctly, shame on me for forgetting these folks in Britain. But anyway, they were great. Jonathan Ralph, that was one.
There's one gag in particular, and I was telling the guys here that I've never forgotten, and I don't know when it was, but I found it today on YouTube, and just by the appearance, I could tell it has to be. Would it be the 70s? Do you think, when Candid Camera was playing in England? Would it be the 70s?
Oh, the 60s. Their 60s? Run was in the 60s. Yeah.
Okay, so it's when the guy goes in and he eats the goldfish. He's got a carrot, and he puts his hand in the fish tank and he eats the goldfish. And the reaction from...
Yeah, we invented that. And that was first on my dad's show. And then they did it over there. And similar, but interestingly different reactions. But when we did it, when my dad did it in the US, it was at a restaurant, and the busboy poured water into the glass. And well, there were two versions. There was the version that had the carrot, and then our guy eats it as if it's a goldfish.
Right.
There was another version where it was a real goldfish swimming around in the glass. And the subject, which is what we call the unsuspecting person, has to call the waiter over and explain there's a fish in my glass.
Right.
Funny moment.
And
Oh, okay, yeah. No, I remember that very, very well. Just one more question. How did the British version come about? Did the British come and ask you if they could license it, or did you decide to put it all in, around the world?
Sort of some of both. My father and his company, and in some cases CBS, which was the network here, made overtures in certain markets, Canada for sure, the UK, Australia was another good spot, English speaking places where we could license, authorize. Heck, it was almost like a McDonald's franchise, you know. We'd give them all the material and they'd figure out how to do it locally. And those were the good imitations. Those were the days where we didn't resent this stuff. We loved it and we encouraged them. We were profiting off their success.
Right. Yeah.
But it was, I don't know what was the chicken and the egg. My dad found these folks and then they hired their own local performers and worked out great.
So I just have a couple more questions for you. In 1996, you hosted the 50th anniversary of the show. It had run for 50 years. Does that mean it had run continuously for 50 years? Or I think we may have talked about that. Was there breaks in between the runs?
Yeah, there were breaks. There was one big break in the late 1950s. That was the first break. My father was off series television for 3 or 4 years. Now, during that time, he kept doing Candid Camera, but in a different way. He did some commercials with the hidden camera, and he did guest spots on the Jack Paar variety show. That was the predecessor of Johnny Carson's Tonight Show. He did spots on the Gary Moore variety show. And so these were just little 10-minute segments in a larger show. So it wasn't a separate Candid Camera program, but it was Candid Camera within the larger picture. Then he came back on, then off. And yes, there were fallow periods. During those periods, we were always active doing something. He made some Candid Camera movies. We did home video. I did a cable version. We did record albums. I wrote books. There's always Candid Camera applications. And then, but the 50th anniversary and right now our 75th anniversary have to do with the total span of time from the time it began to the present.
Right.
And after the 50th anniversary, you took over as the full-time host, and you had you had 3 sort of memorable co-hosts. So if you don't mind, let's just talk about them. So very quickly, Suzanne Summers.
What are your
Suzanne Summers, a perfect addition to Candid Camera. It was not my idea to partner with her. CBS decided that they had her under contract and this would be a good way to use her talents. But it worked out great for me. Not only is Suzanne funny and a good sport and personable, but she looked so attractive on our show that I frankly never had to worry much about my appearance
Right.
because I knew no one would look at me.
Right.
So I love sitting next to Suzanne. But she's written, I've lost track. I don't know if it's 10 or 15 books, and she does all sorts of stuff. I love
Right.
Suzanne.
Dina Eastwood.
Right. Now, people may not recognize Dina, but they do know her famous last name.
Right.
At the time she worked on Candid Camera, she was married to Clint Eastwood. And I got to know them both here as neighbors in Pebble Beach, California. And when I moved the show from, or was forced to move the show from network TV to cable TV, I had to cut the budget, and I couldn't frankly afford Suzanne anymore. So I was looking for someone who was a little bit less experienced and frankly would work for a lower paycheck, but nonetheless, good at the gags, good in the studio, well-spoken, attractive, etc. And Dina was just perfect. I was so proud of how she grew into that co-host role, and her sequences in the field were remarkably good. I remember one she did where I asked her to wear a cop's uniform, a lady cop, but a parking enforcement cop, and go around in a neighborhood and ticket people for parking poorly in their own driveway.
Right. I saw that one. Yeah.
Boy, she did a great job
She did.
with that.
The last one is, the name is Mayim Bialik. Is that how you say it?
You're close. It's Mayim
Mayim.
Bialik. So, yeah, Mayim is a good friend, I'm happy to say now. At the time she went to work on Candid Camera, she was on television's #1 sitcom, The Big Bang Theory. And so a lot of people knew Mayim from that. And now currently, by the way, I wish I were doing new episodes of Candid Camera with Mayim right now,
Right.
because she's as hot as anybody can
Right.
be. She's
Definitely.
got a hosting job on Jeopardy and her sitcom called Call Me Kat, and she did a movie about her dad. She's multi-talented. She's a brainiac. Mayim knows she got a PhD in neuroscience. She knows
Right.
everything about everything. One is easily embarrassed sitting next to her because, I'm sitting there trying to say something funny or ad lib on the show, and Mayim would interrupt and say, Peter, you didn't conjugate that verb properly, or, she's very smart. I love Mayim. And, as I think I said earlier, Charles, we are now working on a new Candid Camera series. And I have some partners at Village Roadshow Entertainment, and we're trying to hook up. Can't quite announce our network deal yet, but we're getting
Yeah, I'm
close.
going to ask you, I'm getting to the last couple of questions, but
Going back to the three hosts, very unfair question. Did you have a favorite? Or, of course, they were all favorites.
The favorite was the one I was working with at the time. I can tell you that prior to those three lovely women, I had some other co-hosts briefly on specials and whatever that were far from favorites. They had all sorts of problems, didn't get it. And my dad too, his first partner when he went on CBS in 1960 was a very famous guy named Arthur Godfrey, who was well known on television, but was frankly awful on Candid Camera. My dad didn't get along with him from day one. And I'll just say, it's great in television when the chemistry works and the partnership is fun. And I think it comes through to the viewer, and that makes the show better. The opposite is just horrible. When you're sitting there with a partner on the air and the people see right through you, they know you're not really getting along.
right.
Oh boy, you're looking for a trap, an escape
Right.
hatch to get out of there.
Right. I know that feeling.
Okay, so very quickly, because I've taken up definitely more of your time, what do you think about today's quote unquote candid cameras? I'll just run some quick ones by you very quickly. So, Tom Green.
Tom Green, anyone you name, Charles, anybody on your list, whether it's Sacha Baron Cohen or Jamie Kennedy, or there's a
I'll tell you
long.
who I have. So, Tom Green, Eric Andre, which the guys here seem to like a lot, Jamie Kennedy, Scare Tactics, and then Punked, I think, is probably, in my mind, the closest to candid camera would be Punked, but they've sort of focused in on celebrities.
Exactly. And that's something, I mean, we were on long enough that we've done a little bit of everything. And so on very, very rare occasions did focus on celebrities, but by and large, that was not candid camera.
Right.
Now, I'm going to respectfully speak only generally, Charles. Yeah, there was a time in my dad's career when he could no longer protect candid camera as a copyrightable idea. Right. And the door opened to imitators.
Right.
And it became easier and easier to hide a camera. And
Right.
these derivative shows came along. We always felt that many of them were mean-spirited. And so one distinction between what we did and what they were doing was that we were kinder, gentler, and I think more supportive of human nature. And these guys, again, in general, seem to be out to show that people are stupid.
Exactly.
And that's not our thing. First of all, we don't believe that. Yeah, people can make a mistake, people can be fooled, people can appear foolish. But by and large, people aren't fools, and we don't try to twist it so they look that way. So there's so many differences, and you mentioned another one about catching celebrities, or even if they're not celebrities, there's this sort of gotcha retaliation format, which is we'll partner up with your girlfriend and we'll retaliate for something against you, and blah, blah, blah. You know, it's a big universe. There's room for everybody. It may not be my cup of television, but good for them.
I've seen most of them. I do like those kind of shows, and I have to say that honestly, not just because you're here, Candid Camera was always my favorite. It was clean. It had the best gags, I think. It was just a very, very clean show. Two more questions. Will Candid Camera ever come back?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I hope it's me doing it. I hope it's soon. We were sort of stopped, as so many people were, by the pandemic. We were very close to our deal to come back on, and then the pandemic shut everything down.
Yeah.
And in fact, hidden camera would be the thing you'd least want to do during a pandemic, because you can't control it, and we wouldn't want to photograph people wearing masks, and we wouldn't want to do it. So that did delay things. We're just now getting back to the point where happily we can get our network deal, and I hope announce quite soon that we will in fact be back on the air. And then, the next question I'm often asked is, oh yeah, well then how will Candid Camera be different? What will the new Candid Camera consist of? And I say, honestly, I imagine we'll have a fancy new stage set. I'll have a new co-host. We might re-record the music and on. But the sequences and the formula is essentially as my dad invented it, which is tapping the zeitgeist for things that people can relate to, make a little joke out of it, and show that people are good sports, even today.
And you have a lot more outlets, you know, you have all the platforms now, where before you just had the networks. So what is Peter Funt up to now? I know you have a stage show that you do, a theater show. You travel around basically doing what we're doing.
I just a few months ago finished my book, Self-Amused, a Tell Some Memoir. I write newspaper columns for the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, and sometimes the Washington Post. So I keep busy as a columnist. I'm working on 2 more documentaries as we speak, neither related to candid camera and has nothing to do with hidden camera. And really, most importantly, I'm trying to get this deal to get candid camera back on TV. But as of today's visit to you, I'm happy that we have Mr. Candid Camera, the documentary about my dad. It was a labor of love for me. I hope it properly represents his career and a bit of his life and answers some of the questions that his fans over decades had about the real Alan Funt and what was going on behind the scenes with the Hidden Camera Show.
Well, Peter, we've come to the end. I really want to thank you for your time. We've double what we normally do, but it's been a delight for me for sure. And I'm very happy that you're actually going to join us. And then we will have an in-conversation in person that very same day.
Thank you for the kind words. And I do look forward to visiting and getting to meet the folks in person if they care to come watch our film. So I'll see you then.
Well, thank you very much, Peter, for joining us. I hope everybody will come and see Peter in person. He will actually be with us at the film festival when we screen Mr. Candid Camera. And then on Saturday at J.J. Pfister at the Barrel Room, there'll be an in-person conversation between myself and Peter in front of an audience. And I hope everyone can join us then. Thank you for watching another episode of Doc Talks.